He has actually lived in St. Louis for quite some time, so he's from here originally. It's been a while coming back, but he does business and comes back fairly regularly. He has been growing since he was 12, specializes in a lot of irregular species. Today specifically, he's going to talk to us about Mediterranean related orchids and growing those. In my understanding, you at least have over 500 orchid species. I think you actually told me much higher than that today.
Yeah, 500 or 600. It's hard to count.
You kind of lose count at a certain point when you get that high. But he's been going for a long time and specializes in all of those creatives. He also does a lot of beneficial pests and preferably not doing a lot of pesticides. So if you have questions about that, he's not going to specifically talk about it today, but you can always request some of that information, and maybe we'll consider bringing it back out here again to talk about that. So without further ado, I'm going to let you go. Make sure you turn on your mic.
It's on.
Oh, it is on. Okay. Yep. I can do that.
It is a great pleasure to be here tonight, coming back to St. Louis. And I remember vaguely when I was 12, I was given a plant by a neighbor, which I killed, quite quickly. And I had to go learn about orchids from the St. Louis Public Library back in those days. There was no internet. And it was interesting because I learned about this society called the St. Louis Orchid Society. And I read in the newspaper that they were having an auction. And I came in 1968 to an auction at the Nash's house. And it was fascinating. And of course, I think they were really nice to me because I was a 12-year-old kid. And it was amazing that I won some of the orchids by only bidding once and nobody bid against me. It was amazing. Anyway, I started to grow orchids. I got addicted, as many of you probably did. And, I look here and you have the display and stuff like that, and there are going to be ribbons there. And what's fun is I went back, my parents made me keep a scrapbook. I don't know if any of you had to do that when you were kids, but a scrapbook. And I wanted to go back and see if there was anything in there. And I found something interesting. I found these 2 St. Louis Orchid Society first place ribbons, okay, from the 1960s. So they're a little simpler. Now, first place, I probably didn't keep anything that wasn't first place, but they're a little simpler than they are now. But anyway, it was kind of fun going back, and those were orchids that I was probably so proud to bring in and so excited to do. Today, I want to talk about a kind of orchid that I'm really excited about. And these are orchids that come from the Mediterranean regions of the world, Mediterranean climates. And let me talk a little bit about what that means. What is a Mediterranean climate? Many of you probably have gone to them on vacation, but basically they are temperate, seasonal, and generally the ocean is to the west of them. They have mild, rainy winters. Generally it doesn't freeze or only light freeze or light frost in those areas. They have hot, dry summers with no rain. So in many of these areas, it can stop raining in April and it won't rain again until September or October, bone dry. So it requires that orchids adapt to that in order to survive. Here are the 5 Mediterranean regions of the world. There's one where I live in California. There's the Mediterranean Basin, obviously. There's Chile, South Cape of Africa, and Western and South Australia. So these all have similar climates, and the orchids have similar characteristics in all of those different places. And you can get orchids from many of those areas. So how do they work? How do they adapt to this area? Well, they generally grow in the winter, okay, when it's rainy and cool and stuff like that, but there's water. And so that's when they actually grow. They flower in the spring as soon as it starts to warm up. And by the time it gets hot and the rains stop, they dry up and shrivel up. Okay, and they just turn into nothing. So you go on vacation, your plants go on vacation. It's really good. You don't have to do absolutely anything at all until Halloween or September when the kids go back to school. So it's they're very low maintenance in the summer. Nothing to do, nothing to water. In fact, you don't want to water. This is like the opposite of most orchids you grow, where they like lots of water in the summer. These want 0 in the summer. Okay, so here's what the Mediterranean region looks like. And I've marked these climate zones. You don't need to look at all the detail here, but you can see that the zones for the orchids are all around the coasts, in the coastal areas. And that's because that's temperate there. If you go up into Europe, at the top of the screen there, it's too wet. These orchids do not like it to be wet in the summer, and so they don't grow there. And if you go into Africa and so forth, Morocco, Algeria, it's too dry. That's a desert. There's no water ever. So the orchids, most orchids generally don't grow in those areas. So you expect to see these orchids coming from the regions you see here. So I'm going to talk about a number of the different genera of these. These are the ones I'll cover tonight. Serapeus are tongue orchids, and you'll see why they're called that. Ophrys bee orchids, orchis man orchids or monkey orchids, and Anacamptis. These grow in meadows, and they're winged or butterfly orchids. And this is a Serapeus lingua. Lingua is Latin for tongue. And you can probably see why they call it that. That red lip protrudes out there, sort of like somebody sticking their tongue out at you. And that's sort of not that cool all by itself, but you know, when you have a pot of them, it gets more interesting. So this is a pot of Serapeus lingua growing. And you'll notice a couple things here. You'll notice it's a white pot, and I'll say more about that later. That's valuable if you grow them in the sun. And you notice it's sort of this pebbly, rocky stuff they're in. They are terrestrials, and they grow in poor soil generally, poor, rocky soils. This is Serapeus vomeracea. This one's kind of cool because it's got all those little hairs in the lip there, and it's kind of fun. Again, it's sticking its tongue out at you. This is Cortigera. This is really the most intensely colored of them, and you sort of say, wow, look at that lip. That's kind of crazy there. Here's a bunch of them all together. I sort of like these. They're very easy to grow, and they're prolific, and so you end up with lots of them pretty quickly. This is Ophrys. Ophrys are the bee orchids, and this is Ophrys cerastes. And these are a lot of fun. They have some interesting stories, and I'll tell some of them in a second. But they're highly adapted, and they're pollinated generally only by one species of insect. They're so adapted for that. And they have other things like they produce insect hormones in order to attract the various insect pollinators they want. So they're very sophisticated on how they do that. This one's a fun one. It's pretty. You can see why they're called the bee orchids. It sort of looks like, well, I don't know what that looks like. Here's another one. This is Ophrys mimosa. And you can see it has that shiny lip there and sort of fuzzy. It's like velvet that peeled off and has shiny stuff underneath. This is what it looks like when it's growing. These typically have a rosette near the ground, and then they put a stem up, and it will open flowers sequentially, and it'll have a whole bunch open at the same time. But they're fairly far apart to encourage the pollinators. This is Ophrys sphagotes. People insist that that's a different species than the first one I showed, and here's what they look like side by side. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about the people who do nomenclature, but I don't know. What do you think? Are those different species, or are they the same? I don't know. There's the lumpers and the splitters, right? And so definitely this was the splitters who did this one. I think those are pretty identical. This is one. This is fun. Look at the fuzz on the lip on this one. This is Ophrys tenthredinifera. That's a mouthful. This one's very pretty. It's yellow and violet and whatnot. This one's about 3 or 4 inches tall, so they're not very big, but they have these interesting flowers. This one is Ophrys lutea. This one's definitely bright yellow, and it's kind of fun. In its native area where it grows in the south of Greece, it will cover a meadow, and the whole meadow will look sort of yellow, and it'll be from these flowers. This is Ophrys bomboliflora. Looks like a bumblebee or something like that. It's pollinated by a big bee, and it's got that sort of glossy throat in there. Not very pretty, is it? I don't know. Mother would love that, right? This is another one that only a mother would love. This is Ophrys regis fernandandii. And again, look at a couple things here. Look at the fuzz all over it, and look at the lip. The lip's got this sort of metallic, shiny area, and I'm going to say more about that with some of these others. This is Ophrys vernixia. Ophrys vernixia is fairly common, distributed through the south part of Europe there, and it has this bluish metallic spot on the lip. And here's another picture of Ophrys vernixia. And you can see that it has that sort of sports car, you know, that old old Jaguar sports car color in the lip there. And this is grown by Madonna here among you guys. And so this is her picture that flowered this, a picture she sent me of this flowering this year. And we actually have that plant here, and I'll say more about that later. Now, look at all the fuzz on this thing. Look at these weird protrusions, and you know, why would an orchid go to the trouble to have a metallic blue spot on it? And the answer is it wants to attract a certain kind of pollinator. Well, here's what the pollinator looks like. So you can see on the left is an Ophrys phoenixia flower. On the right is its pollinator. Look at the metallic blue reflections off of the wings. Okay, look at the fuzz on the legs. Okay, and that's what it's trying to attract. And well, why is it so important that it attract this specific one? And what's going on here? Well, guess how this gets pollinated? It blooms first. The bee comes out of the ground, and the bee goes, wow. The male bee comes out of the ground, and the male bee goes, wow, I'm lucky. Okay, and it finds the Ophrys phoenixia flower, and the flower gets pollinated, but not bees. So this also produces pheromones that attract the bee, and so the bee is quite thoroughly convinced, I think, that it has found its true love. This is, okay, the R-rated portion is over, sorry. This is Anacamptis. Anacamptis is a meadow flowering plant. It's widely distributed in Europe. And you'll see this growing. It's not very tall. It's probably only 3 inches tall, so hence the magnified picture there. But there are a lot of different species of this. This is Papilionaceae, and you can see that it's named after a butterfly, and you sort of see the butterfly spreading wings there on that. This is another one. This is a variation of that. This is Expansa. I love this one. This is a really fun one and usually much more showy than some of the others. And again, that's only 3 or 4 inches tall, so it's not very big, but it's cute.
You mean the plant is 3 or 4 inches, or the flower?
The plant with the flower is 3 or 4 inches. This is Orchis italica. This is one I have wanted to grow since I was a kid. Okay, this one I think is totally cool, and I'll show you some better pictures of it later. And I got a tuber of this, and I was so excited. And the first year I grew it, this is 2016, it looked like that, and I went, okay, yeah, it's all right, it's sort of cool. And then the following year it looked like that, so it definitely had gotten bigger and grown. This is called the Italian man orchid, let's see, I'll sort of let you look closely and figure out why it's called the man orchid. But I said there was another R-rated part of this talk. Oh well. But anyway, I love this one. It smells like clover. If you've ever smelled some of that pink clover that grows in meadows, this one is intensely pink clover smelled. And I wonder if there's some relationship with pollinators and so forth between the two. Following year, it looked like that. So having good success with this one. So it was happy. Okay, and of course, you always want your orchids to be happy, right? And they grow bigger. There's another picture of it there, and again, just intensely fragrant on this one. Somebody pointed out, they had one of these and they said, my leaves are all diseased and they have these brown spots on them and I think it's dying. And it turns out there's 2 varieties of this. There is a regular plain leaf green one and there is a spotted leaf one. And the spotted leaf one, those are actually purple spots, but they look brown because purple and green sort of, that's brown. And so a lot of people may think their plant is sick or dying. No, it's the spotted variety. So let me talk about South Africa. South Africa has a very small Mediterranean region, but it has some interesting orchids that grow there. You can see here the orchid growing regions. Again, a very small spot on the Cape on the southwestern portion of that. The rest of it is too dry or too wet. It gets too wet as you go around to the right, and as you go north, it gets too dry. This is Satyrium coriifolium. This is actually spectacular. This will grow about 2 feet tall, 3 feet tall, and it has these intensely colored yellow flowers, and it's fairly easy to grow. So this is a new one for my collection in the last few years, and I'm pretty happy with it. Boy, does anybody grow Dizas? Don't you hate Dizas? Oh, can you grow Dizas? They work? You like them? They flower? They live more than a year?
Yes.
Excellent.
Can't take them out of flats, but you have to keep the roots pretty cold this time.
Cold and wet, yeah.
When we get into June and July.
This is a Diza that likes hot and dry. So for if you can't grow the beautiful Dizas, you can grow this ugly Diza. Let me talk about Australian ones. Australian ones are my favorite. They have all kinds of interesting species here. I'm going to talk about Diuris, the donkey orchids, the sun orchids, by far my favorite. Myrmekyla. Ant orchids, caladinia. Caladinas are interesting because they don't have roots, and I'll say more about that. And Terrestrials, which are green hoods. The diurus ones, well, let me talk about Australia. Australia is a continent. Most people think of Australia as sort of like the size of you know, Oklahoma or something. It's actually quite large. And what I've done here is I've shown the countries or states that the weather is represented by. So Sahara Desert in the middle of it. And you can see that over on the left-hand side at the bottom, there's that thing that says Southern California. That's the Mediterranean area of Australia. And that's where most of the orchids are found that are of this variety. This is a close-up of Perth and the area around it. And this is where donkey and bee orchids are found. Diurus donkey orchids are kind of fun. Let me show you a few of those. This is Diurus drummondii. And you can see the donkey ears, right? And that's why they're called donkey orchids. These are relatively easy to grow. They're brightly colored flowers. They grow in grassy meadows. And they stick up, they grow fairly tall, and they stick up above the grass. So you'll go there and it looks like grass everywhere except for all these things sticking up above the grass. This is Diurus orientis. And you can see those two big donkey ears on that one. This is one of my favorites. It's my second favorite one. This is Diurus amplissima. And I love the fact that it has green and purple and orange and red and yellow all in the same flower. You don't see that very often. There's a close-up of Diurus amplissima. This is my favorite, Diurus magnifica. Well named, I think. And this adds just some extra color in there, and it's quite a beautiful flower. So this one's kind of fun. These are Terrestrials curta. This is a very easy plant to grow. I was given about 2 tubers of this, and the following year I had about 20 tubers. The following year I had about 400, and basically. It turns into these gigantic pots of tubers, and you get these nice sort of show of flowers. The flowers aren't particularly beautiful. I mean, they sort of go, eh. But I think as a pot, it's a very striking looking thing, and it's kind of fun to grow, and it's very easy to grow. That's probably the easiest of all of these to grow if you want to try. And they're generally plentiful. Anybody who's started to grow one, you ask them if they have any tubers, and they say, in August, I'll have hundreds. This is Myrmekyla. This is Myrmekyla truncata. And we were talking before about flowers that only a mother could love. Okay, this one is pollinated by ants, and it's pollinated by a flying ant. And if you look closely in the sort of center of it there, those 2 sort of bug eyes and maybe those warty things, that must look like really good to an ant or something like that. You know, like its favorite food or its favorite friend or something. But this one is an inch high. Okay, so this is a highly magnified picture. If you truly like the weird, you'll like this kind of thing. Otherwise, don't bother with this one. This is caladinia. Caladinas are quite beautiful flowers. This is the one that doesn't have any roots. Okay, and you say, well, how can it not have any roots? How does that work? Well, most of these grow, and they have a tuber, and the roots and the shoot both come from the top of the tuber, and the roots grow down. This one starts to grow roots, and they're little stubs, but then it stops. And it relies on the mycorrhiza in the soil, the fungi in the soil that invaded it, and it uses them for nutrients. So when you want to grow this one, you're not only growing a pot of orchids, you're growing a pot of fungus. Okay, and you have to keep both happy. So these are among the hardest of the terrestrial orchids to grow, but they are interesting and beautiful. You'll notice they got sort of a little fuzz all over them and a very intricate lip. Here's another one. This is Harlequin. This is a cross by Speciosa. And again, the sort of pastel shadings in these. I like these a lot. I find them challenging to grow, but rewarding. Okay, I'm going to talk about Thelamitras. Thelamitras are my favorite Australian orchid, and I like them because they have some very interesting colors. And you can see they tend to have a fairly wide range here where they grow. Most of the ones that are interesting grow over into the Perth area on the left bottom side of the screen there. This is Thelomitra Queen Adelaide. It comes in a number of different variations. It's a cross, but there are a number of color variations. This one's a very light colored one. Here's one that's more orangey, apricot colored. And these are called the sun orchids. And the reason they're called the sun orchids is because they only open the flowers on perfectly sunny days. Okay, if it's cloudy, nope, they're going to stay closed. And if it's sunny in the morning and it gets cloudy, bloop, you will never see these at Judges, okay? Because you can't bring them for judging, because you bring them inside to a table like that, bloop, all the flowers close up. So you have to persuade the judge to go to the parking lot where you have the plant. Okay, come look at this and see it. So it's a challenge. This is melon glow. Another one of the things. There's a lot of hybridization going on with these, creating some really interesting ones. This is one of my favorites. This is Ron Heberly, and you notice it has sort of a dark sort of pink color there with blue spots on it, and the bright yellow pollen on that. So this is a good cross. Let me talk about blue. The reason I like Thelamitris is because there's a bunch of blue species. And a lot of people say, oh, well, I have blue orchids. I have Cattleya caerulea. That's not blue. That's lavender. Come on. These are truly blue. These are intensely blue. And let me show you a journey of that. So I ordered one of the really blue ones, and I potted it the first year. And it bloomed, and I only got a couple flowers on it, but the buds were opening. I was so excited. I got my camera ready and everything, and it opened up, and it looked like that. And I went, I got ripped off. This isn't blue. That's like almost Cattleya caerulea colored. And I was really disappointed, and I called up the guy who sold it to me, who's a plant botanist and fairly knowledgeable guy. And I said, que pasa? I pay a lot of money for this thing, and it's not blue. And he says, well, what are you growing it in? And I said, well, I'm growing it in the same thing I grow all my European terrestrials. And he goes, oh, no, they like acid soil. And I said, oh. And he says, yeah, go look up hydrangeas. Do you guys grow hydrangeas? You know what happens if you grow hydrangeas in alkaline soil? They're pink. What happens if you grow them in acidic soil? They're blue. Well, so I put acidic fertilizer on it, and the next year, okay, here you see, the next year, it looked like that. So, okay, now it's blue. And it's interesting because they grow in acidic clay soils, and it turns out they are very sensitive to the pH of the acidity of the media that they're in. So if you want to grow these, unlike all the others, these you want to pay attention, because unless you like lavender better than blue, probably don't, you want to get this color. So now that I got the hang of it, I grew some other species. This is Thelomitra crinita. This is Thelomitra crinita crossed with Glaucophylla. So that's the first two you saw crossed. And you see you get much more dense flowering here. This is Alcocii bicrinita. I like the really intense blue on this one. Good color there. And this is Cyanea. This is called the swamp Thelomitra. So this one grows, if you don't like this idea that you have to dry them out a lot, this is yours, because this one only has a dormancy period of about 1 month. And it grows in wettish areas, and so it likes that. It's not as intense blue overall, but it's got the nice stripes in it. This is Dentata by Glaucophylla, striped. It's a striped variation of it. There are a lot of these that all have sort of these blue colors. This is Thelomitra Glaucophylla by Grandiflora. I like this one because the flowers are bigger. The flowers on this one are about 3 inches across. So it's kind of nice. Well, I wanted to see if I could do even better on the blue. And I did a little homework, and it turns out there are two things that affect the color of blue in Thelamitris. One is the pH or acidity. The other is the amount of aluminum ions in the soil. Aluminum comes from clay. Okay, it grows in acidic clay soils, so there's aluminum-rich clay soils that are acid. And if you grow hydrangeas, typically the way you get hydrangeas to turn blue and make them acid is you throw aluminum sulfate on them. Okay, and so you're not just making the soil acidic, you're adding those aluminum ions, which also help the blue color in the particular pigment it has. The anthocyanins are the pigment in these, and they are very sensitive to that. By the way, I'd love to do some trials. If you do like your Cattleya caeruleas, which are fake blue, you might try adjusting the pH of what they're growing on and what you water them with and see if it changes. But anyway, so I did this. I added some aluminum sulfate to the mix. Aluminum sulfate is extremely corrosive acidic, so you have to be very careful if you do this. You better use a pH meter and don't overdo it. But when you do it, here's what happened when it opened. And I was going, whoa, okay, that was really nice. So I would represent that this is about as blue as you can get in an orchid. And here it is. And I tend to put my hand in the photos because if you look online, there's a lot of Photoshop photos out there, okay, that are all fake and whatnot. But this is getting a really good blue color out of that. So let me talk about how you grow these. It's really important to talk about the life cycle because they do have a different life cycle than many of the orchids you grow. How you pot them, light, water fertilizer, et cetera here. So here's what they do. So in August, in the middle of summer, they are a dormant tuber. They are just like a bulb you would buy for spring planting anywhere. And in early autumn, they start to grow a shoot and the roots from the top of the tuber. So they don't grow from the bottom like a daffodil. They grow from the top down. So it's important to get them fairly far in the soil, in the mix, so that they have some room for the roots to grow. In early winter, like November-ish, they'll start to push out and you'll see a sprout come out. Early spring meaning like December or January, like really, really early spring. You'll start to see the leaves fill out, a flower bud, and then like in somewhere between February and April, they'll bloom. And at the same time, the leaves will start dying back, and then within a month or so after blooming, they're back to that dormant tuber again. So if you give them this cycle, they will be happy and they're relatively easy to grow. If you water them when they're dormant, they'll rot. If you don't water them in the winter or you freeze them in the winter, they won't grow. But if you do this and get this right, you'll have no problem with these kinds of orchids. This is what a tuber looks like. This is Orchis italica, that Italian man orchid. This is about 5 centimeters or 2 inches for scale there. The tubers are different between the different species, but most of them look sort of like that. In November, you'll start to see it poke out. So here it is leafing out there, coming out. By December, you start to see a number of them leaf out, some not yet. So they sort of take their time. Some will, if nothing leaves out by April, sorry, dead. But generally they'll come out in the spring. This is what it looks like in January at my house, where you have a whole bunch of different ones. The big ones there are the Satyriums. You can see the grassy looking ones in front are Thelamitras. Let's see, in the back are some of the Caladinas and other things, but a mix of things here. And I grow them and they get full sun, full morning sun. So 100% full morning sun. And they like that. And the white pots, and I'll say more about that later, are to help prevent the sun from overheating the pots. In California, we can have 80-degree days in January, and that can get hot. This shows a variety of them blooming, so you get a sense of the scale of some of these. So you can see the 2 diuris in the middle. Those are the donkey ones. The ophrys over on the left, and the Orchis man orchid on the right. And so this shows the full plant. Before I just showed you the flowers of this one, Ophrys lutea. But look at those leaves. Okay, you'd normally go, oh, my orchid's sick, it's dying. Okay, it's not dying, it's going dormant. Okay, and it's interesting because the flowers will bloom, and when these get pollinated, they will go to seed pod in like 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, they go very fast because they're racing the water running out. So they have to do their whole life cycle before the water runs out. And so they start to turn yellow and brown even while they're in bloom as part of going dormant. And as soon as you see this, no water. Okay, 0. You have to just resist. Those of you like me who like to water everything, you have to say, nope, no water. And then soon it looks like this. And Madonna was kind enough to bring in her orchid. And you see this dead-looking thing in the pot here? That's a healthy plant. You wouldn't believe it, would you? It's probably a healthy plant. There's probably a new tuber underneath there that formed and will be ready for next year to sprout. Okay, so again, the plant's gone on vacation, you can go on vacation, see you in the fall. And if you are lucky and you do it right, you will find 0, 1, or more tubers in the pot at the end of the year. Sometimes 0 is very sad, but often you'll find 1, or sometimes you can find 2, 3, 5, 10 tubers in the pot, depending how happy it was. So potting. A couple things here. I use white pots, 4 to 6 inches, and if you put them in the sun, the white pots are handy. You want very aerating inorganic materials, almost all inorganics. So inorganics like sand, pumice, finely ground granite, lava rock, finely ground though, it has to be very, very small, but a high amount of inorganics. I use perlite a little bit. I don't use too much perlite because the pot will blow over or a bird will knock it over or whatever. If you grow it inside under lights, you probably could use a higher percentage of perlite. You don't have wind risk. The European ones come from calcareous soils, that's lime in the soil, a little more alkaline. I don't recommend things like oyster shells or limestone. It's kind of too harsh. I would use marble chips. Marble chips are, they sort of degrade very slowly, and they create a little more calcium and alkaline soil in a very gentle way. Thelametra is like the acidic soil. So for those, you want to use like bonsai mix of Kanuma fertilizers. Generally, you want to aim for 4 to 5 pH for those guys, so fairly acidic. The remaining should be inorganic ingredients. No peat moss. Peat moss kills the mycorrhiza. Don't use peat moss. Don't use sphagnum because sphagnum doesn't dry out very quickly. It'll retain too much water. I like coconut fiber, coir. That works pretty well. You want to plant them a couple inches deep in the pot in dry media. So you don't, normally you plant like bulbs and things like that. You put the bulb in there and you water it in. These you put it in the dry media and you leave it alone until it's time. At the end of the season, often they'll be at the bottom of the pot, and then never discard the old media. Okay, often there'll be these little tiny sub-peppercorn sized tubers in there, and if you plant all the old media, you'll get a pot full of orchids. You just didn't see all the tubers. This is diurus. These tubers look like worms, and they're at the bottom of the pot at the end of the year, and you can then take each one of those and it'll be a new plant. But because they're at the bottom of the pot, it makes sense every couple of years to dump it out and move them up so they aren't at the very bottom. If you leave them at the bottom, you get this, which is really sad. There's a plant growing out the bottom and there's nothing you can do about it. Oh well. Temperature and light. If you happen to live in California, that's good. If you don't, you want to generally keep them cool and moist when they're growing. So in the winter, cool and moist, and as much light as you can give them. They like full sun if you can give it to them, or just as bright as you've got. Once they're dormant, put them in the shade, keep them dry. It's actually good to put them, if you have a place protected by from rain here, to put them outside in the summer, because you want them to feel that sort of daily rhythm of hot, and then they'll detect that, oh, it's fall coming and it's getting cooler, and that will help them decide to sprout. So if you can find a non-rainy, dry spot in the summer outside here, that would be great. Water and fertilizer, they are totally deciduous in the summer. Don't do anything there. For water, I recommend RO water, rainwater, or distilled water. I think that's best. They don't like a lot of salts, so you want to be a little careful there. Light fertilizer. So if you're measuring it, it's 200 ppm is what I recommend. But generally, think of it as lighter than you would do for those orchids there. If they flower or the leaves start to yellow, cut off the water. It's like the guy who had too much at the bar. You know, you need to stop completely, cut them off. When the fall arrives, as soon as you see anything sprout, water them if they sprout. And if they haven't started by October, water them anyway. Propagation, again, you'll find multiple ones in the pot. Be careful to save the soil. The soil has the fungus that they like. Okay, so you want to always take some of that with them as you transplant them to new places. And then the tubers can be really tiny. And here's an example where I transplanted a Satyrium, that's the big one there, and a wonderful Caladinia sprouted in the pot. And those Caladinas are really hard to grow and wonderful. And I go, oh, the Caladinia was more interesting to me than the big one over on the right. But I got a new Caladinia. So you just want to, that's the benefit of reusing the mix. Pests, these don't have a lot of pests. If you generally have snails or slugs, you want to worry about that a little bit. Make sure you protect for those. Occasionally you'll get aphids, but not very often. And if you grow them inside under lights, you don't need to worry about that at all. You probably don't have either of those. Biggest enemy, watering at the wrong time. This is a companion plant. I like to grow carnivorous plants, and this one grows in a similar condition. This is Drosophilum lusitanica. It grows in a Mediterranean region at the south of Spain and Portugal. It likes to be dry. Most carnivorous plants like to be soaking wet in a pot of water. This one likes to be dry. And it does its job catching all the black fungus gnats and all the other little icky things. And it's kind of a fun-looking plant. It has beautiful yellow flowers. So a recommendation if you want a companion plant for these kinds. So sources, where can you get these? Well, unfortunately, there aren't very many. The best time to buy tubers is when they're dormant and that's June through the rest of the summer. Fortunately, June is coming up. If you want to find some of these, next month is the time to look for them. The sources on eBay, you're going to see these on eBay. Don't buy from eBay. The sources, they take wild plants, they illegal export them, or they're just mistreated. Never buy seed. Do not buy orchid seed. Yes?
Also, don't buy them on Etsy. That's where I got mine. And the seller said they were in California. The package came from Romania.
Yeah.
Came from
Yeah.
Romania.
Yeah, and they're harvested wild. I don't know. I think it's decimating a lot of the natural things there. There are some other sources. There's a US source called tarzanegroup.com. If you look at their website, you need to like start camping out on their website because they will post these like a random day in June and they will sell out completely in 3 days. So it's one of those things you might create a watch group among you if you're interested, and somebody can say, hey, they're up. But they're a reputable source for European and Australian species. The best source is myorchids.de in Germany, and they have European, Australian, and South African species. And I've gotten the majority of mine from them. The guy who runs that is a plant biologist who is a specialist in mycorrhiza. So a very interesting guy, Heinrich Berle. He's a good guy. You'll need a USDA import permit to get them from there and a phytosanitary certificate. Does anybody in this group have an import permit? Nobody. Okay, it's really easy. You go to the USDA site. I want an import permit. It like doesn't cost any money. You just have to fill out a bunch of forms and check a bunch of boxes that you understand all the rules and stuff, and you get one. So somebody in the group could go get one of those. And the phytosanitary certificate costs in Germany costs about $70. And so doing a group order, if you want to order one, okay, $70 for the certificate's a lot of money, but you can have any number of plants on the same certificate. So you can divide that cost among multiple people if you want to do it. Where do you get white pots, marble chips, other supplies? Amazon has everything these days. They should be pretty easy to find.
Quick question for you, Scott, on the permit. Don't you have to list your species ahead of time, though?
You have to,
When
no,
apply for it?
you do not have to list the species. That's on the phytosanitary certificate.
Okay.
The permit just has what countries you're importing from. So just include Germany. I mean, while you're at it, say Peru and Ecuador and all the other places you might want to import from, Thailand, pick all the places you might want to import from, just include Germany. And then it's fine. And because they prepare a phytosanitary certificate, they don't stop it at the border and disinfect it and all that stuff. So that's the value there. And then you'll also know that your plants are CITES safe and they haven't been illegally harvested and they were propagated. So that's the best source. Tarzan Group is the easiest source in the United States because it's a U.S. source. They're based in Florida, and they'll send stuff out. Beginner plants. So if you want to try these, the easiest ones I think are this. Terrestrials curta, that was the green hoods one that fills up the pot. Serapius, the tongue guys. Diurus, those are the donkey ear ones. Philomitra, glaucophylla, and the hybrids, the blue ones. Those are not that hard to grow. Satyrium coriifolium, that's the yellow one with the big stalk. Ophrys. The easiest ones I think are mimosa and sphagodes, although Madonna was successful with vernixia, which is normally a much harder one. So it can be done. So with that, I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much, and happy growing. I am happy to take questions on anything in the talk or anything else on what I grow or whatever. Sir?
You had a slide that listed what you can use to grow them. What do you use? Like the media.
What do I use? Well, I'd love to tell you I'm very scientific and have an exact mix and stuff like that. So what I use is a function of the newest thing I thought of and what I have in the basement. I don't know, probably what you do. So I typically have bags of sand. I have fine pumice, and I have coir, the coconut fiber, and I have various of the bonsai mixes that I use, and the inorganic bonsai mixes, because they're fine and those work pretty well. And I throw a little bit of perlite in, but not too much, because again I have wind risk. But you could use a lot more perlite. Generally, just be careful of putting organics in that are going to mess with the fungus. That's the thing. Yes, ma'am.
How often do you repot?
Depends how anxious I am about what's in the pot. To be honest, I try to repot every other year, and some people I know repot every year. I don't think it hurts to repot every year. I would not let it go a bunch of years because they're going to tend to get pushed down against the very bottom of the pot, and you're going to start getting sprouts mostly out the sides, which you don't want. So.
Along that line of drying out, the mycorrhizal fungi you want to keep in it, but obviously it goes dormant. Do you know anything about the process of how does it stay alive if it's going to come back next year if you keep it bone dry?
Most of the fungi can spore and can manage to survive dry. I have never seen an issue where the orchid survives, but the fungi don't.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't worry about that. Yes.
The little mirror that you were showing that's in the center of the plant, what is the structure that actually causes that sparkling reflection?
I have a talk that I give on blue orchids, and it turns out there's two kinds of color. There is pigment color. Okay, pigment color is like paint. Okay, it's like where there's a substance that has a certain color, and you can mix them. It's also called structural color. And structural color is where the object is the correct size and shape to only reflect certain wavelengths of light. So like butterfly wings are a great example of structural color. A chameleon, the way it changes color, that's structural color. It's not like pumping different colors around in its body. It's changing the size of little tiny things. An opal is a mineral with structural color. Snow is white, but when it melts, the white goes away, right? Because the white is structural rather than an actual color. So it turns out that that is a structural artifact in the plant where it has grown specific cells that have little plates, and they're exactly the right size to create that blue spectrum. So if you were to take a razor blade and cut out the blue part and grind it up, there'd be no blue.
You mentioned that with your fertilizer, you had 200 parts per million, and you said it was low. I would say that sometimes when I'm using fertilizer, 200 parts per million would be a little on the higher end, 200, 250. Are you using more of like an organic or a salt-based fertilizer, and what's like your NPK on that?
I use MSU fertilizer generally. I'll use Miracle Grow acidic fertilizer because it's cheap at the hardware store, and I alternate it with plain RO water. So I'm not using that every fertilization. So I'll do that. I'll do that every couple weeks.
So you're flushing it in between?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm too lazy to like mix it up perfectly each time to water every time. I know some of you probably have the automatic injectors and all this special stuff. I don't do that. I'm lazy.
We mentioned beneficial insect. Is there anything, you said these don't get many pests, but is there anything you typically do put with them to prevent or?
I put the carnivorous plants next to them, and that'll pick off some of the aphids. But generally they don't have a lot of pests. I have frogs, which I use for the snails and slugs. The frogs, I have a turtle. Turtle really likes snails. But those are the kinds of things that help. I think under lights, you're not going to have a lot of trouble with snails and slugs or aphids, or you should be okay on that stuff. So for beneficial insects, you probably don't need to do that. I do use a variety of beneficial insects outside in the collection, but green lacewings, and I don't use ladybugs because they all fly away. They're no good. You buy all these ladybugs, and they last for an hour or two, and they're gone.
She had a question. You grow outside all year long, right? All your
I am fortunately in Southern California, in Orange County, just south of Disneyland. And we have the benefit that we can grow pretty much all of those outside all year round. So it's convenient for that. I can't grow the Phalaenopsis, but pretty much everything else. Phalaenopsis are very temperature sensitive. And I can't grow that Chilocista there. That's really cool. I like that one.
I have a quick follow-up question on it. Does the Thelomitra not have an anther cap on it? It looked like it just had like the pollen at the end of it. Wasn't covered up.
It isn't covered up, and it's not in the granules like you usually see in many orchids where it's encapsulated. It's much more dust powder-like. So it's a little different. It almost looks like a normal plant.
Yeah.
All right, thanks. I'll hang around for a little bit, and thank you very much.
It's
People's choice.